Hello, this is Congressional Update with Michael Capuano. I'm Sarah Fishman. Hi, Mike. How are you?
Wonderful, Sarah. How are you?
I'm good. So we have a lot to talk about. We now have a presumptive Republican presidential candidate. We have a renewed Green Line extension. We have Memorial Day, which was just yesterday. We have a state vote on transgender bathroom accessibility and other public accommodations. So there's much to talk about.
Pretty broad swath of things to talk about.
Yes, but you can handle it.
Sure.
I think you can handle it. We'll do what we can, right? All right, so I want to start with the fact that yesterday was Memorial Day. And I was looking at some of I actually just went to the library, so I saw some of the floral arrangements, memorial floral arrangements. Do you know how long is a tour of duty in the Army? How long does it last?
Generally
Yes.
2 years.
So but it can be anywhere from, say, 6 months to 4 years.
That's correct.
I was told. So do you have a sense of how many tours of duty people do now, or?
Mean in the regular Army or in the reserve?
In the Army.
I have no idea. I assume you have the answer.
Well, I have part of an answer, which is since 2001, 107,000 Army soldiers have been deployed 3 or more times.
Makes sense.
So even if it's only 2 years, but maybe 3, you're talking upwards of 10 years in a 15-year period.
The deployment overseas is not necessarily the full tour. I mean, the deployment overseas, the tour is how long you're in. That takes the time you have to prepare, the time you
right.
decompress, or whatever the term is, when you get back. So,
but it's still a potentially a huge number of years
it's
relative to the time period.
About a year, on average, about a year.
So
maybe
do you
a little
think
bit
that
longer,
that's
actually.
Way too long? Does that have to be changed? Is that?
I don't know. I leave those kinds of decisions up to the military. They have a certain number of people that they have to do this many things with. They got to make the division and make up their own decisions. That's not something.
Have you had any constituents come to you with veterans who have PTSD or
Lots.
other? And what do you do when people say they have problems and maybe they can't get the VA help that they want? Or
They get the VA help they need. I mean, the VA around here, we haven't seen, we get the occasional problem, but we haven't seen the problems that are reported in the national news around here. Again, we do get occasional, there'll be individuals who have problems, but not the broad-based.
I don't know the waiting lists or anything. Are there long waiting lists?
It's not a problem here. I mean, again, it does happen. I don't want to pretend it doesn't happen. But Massachusetts had a long history. If they can't do the service, they will also refer people out outside the VA.
Okay, so not every state does that?
No.
Oh, that's interesting. So Donald Trump, presumptive Republican presidential nominee, actually says on his website that he would alter the Veterans Administration by allowing people to go to private doctors who accepted Medicare, and that he thought that that would force the VA to become more efficient.
Well, that's all well and good, except if you talk to most veterans, they don't want that. They want the VA to work.
Yeah.
They want to use their own system because it's military for military. You go to the general system, they may not understand some of the things the military have gone through, and the average person I talk to, that's not what they're looking for.
Yeah.
Occasionally they are.
That's interesting.
But that's, number one, not what they want. Number two, it will cost a lot more money than a VA that works.
Yeah.
And I think, again, it's the old killing a fly with an elephant rifle. There are problems in the VA, there's no question about it. There are certain districts that have more problems than others. But in general, again, we do get complaints here. Most of the complaints we get are relatively easy to manage. Not all. Like anything else, you get tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people having healthcare problems, and not everyone's going to be satisfied. But that's true in the private sector as well.
Yeah.
We get more complaints about the private sector than we do about the VA.
Interesting. Okay, so that was just a thought. What was I going to say next? So there are also like 50,000 people who have done even more tours, than that in the Army. So we have an interesting situation. There was beginning of May, there was some milestone passed in which Obama became the longest serving war president. president where the U.S. is
Yeah,
engaged in
his
some
entire term.
war. Yeah, both his terms. So, does that surprise you? I mean, is it?
It's been known for a long time that the Afghan War and the Iraq War are the two longest wars in American history. Longer than the Revolution, longer than the Civil War, much longer than World War II or World War I. They're the longest wars we have ever been involved in, with no end in sight, in my opinion.
So is there a difference between, I don't know how to distinguish this, there's no conscription now. So it's not like it touches every family. It certainly touches every family who has a member in service.
Everybody in the military now wants to be in the military.
Yeah. So does that make us less of a nation at war kind of thing? And is that part of the reason that we've had these long wars, because it's not as front and center and
I don't know
required?
the reason why we've had the long wars. I certainly think that it allows people to have the luxury of not having to think about it in a way.
Yeah.
Having been a child of the Vietnam era, everybody thought about the Vietnam War, whether they were in the military or not, because it was looming in front of everyone's face that they might be going to serve. The question is, it's easy to serve in a war that people feel is morally just and we understand why we're in this war.
Yes.
Vietnam started out that way. By the time I was of age, it had changed. The average person didn't know why we were engaged in Vietnam, why all our children were dying, and for what. And that's what got us out of it. We didn't get out of it because politicians wanted us out. We got out because the American people wanted us to get out, and they finally elected enough people to get that done. And I've said for a long time, I don't believe in the draft because the draft is selective. I've never believed in the draft. That generally picks less educated, usually minority people. That's the generic statement. I do believe in universal service, though. I've always believed in universal service, and it doesn't have to be military service. The Germans do it that way. I think it's a good way to do it. You can select the military, you can select community service, you can select Peace Corps, whatever it might be.
How many years would it be?
I'd do just 1 year. And I do 1 year because now everybody's on the same footing. Everybody takes a year off between high school and college, or whatever the time frame is going to be.
The gap year.
Yeah, and no one's at a disadvantage. No one has to give up a portion of their life that somebody else doesn't give up. And I also think it's good for the military. There will be a lot of kids who would join the military for whatever the reasons were, and they would realize, you know what, this isn't so bad. I actually think it'd be good for the military in the long run. And I also think it's good for America for everybody to understand we're part of a bigger thing. It's not all about me going to college, getting a degree, and going to Wall Street and making as much money as I can make. It's also about giving back a little bit to society. And I've always thought that. And we're not there yet. This country is not ready for it. And I think if we did that, there'd be a lot more people who are more deeply involved in all of our foreign issues, not just the Iraq War.
Yeah. So what's going to happen? So we have, how many troops do we have in Afghanistan and Iraq?
I don't know. Iraq, we're not supposed to have many at all, but of course that doesn't count the advisors we're not supposed to have, but we do have in northern Iraq. I don't know, probably a few thousand in Baghdad.
I think it might be 5 in each of them.
Yeah, that sounds about right. And then Afghanistan, probably 20, 30. That sound about right? I don't know.
I thought it was 5 as well, at least in one place.
I might be. I think it's more than that? I'm kind of off it because I haven't, it doesn't matter to me how many we have.
And then several hundred special forces in Syria, where technically we have no one on the ground.
Yeah, and technically they're not supposed to be there.
Right. So now we've talked about this before, getting congressional authority to...
Long overdue. I credit the president for having asked her. This is a real problem with the Republican leadership in Congress that has refused to bring the issue to the floor. And I don't understand it. If they're so gung-ho about taking ISIS out, bring it to the floor and vote for it.
So how come it's...
In Congress, nothing gets done unless the leadership of the House and the leadership of the Senate allows it to come to the floor. That is the most important aspect of being in the majority.
Right.
Not what you get done, but what you at least allow to be debated.
Yeah.
In the House, nothing can come to the floor. No bill, no amendment can come to the floor unless the Republican leadership, through the Rules Committee, allows it. And then you have a chance of getting a vote. I mean, then you get into party affiliations and philosophical affiliations. But it doesn't matter unless the Republican leadership allows it to come to the floor in the House. And this is a classic situation where I've called for, as long as I can remember, reauthorization of both the Iraq War. We had several of those votes last week. I voted to deauthorize it because I think that one's long over. I never voted for it in the first place, and now it's over. And if they want to come back for reauthorize people to be on the ground in Syria relative to ISIS, that's a fair question. And I may well be in the minority on that as well.
What's your position on
My
that?
position is right now that we should not be there. But at least certainly not the way we're there. Because if I come from the old school, if you get in a fight, get in the fight and do it. And if you're not in a fight, quit screwing around with it. It's nothing but dangerous, and it almost always leads to failure. And I just don't see this ending up where we want it to end up.
So what is the likely scenario? Is it going to get worse before it gets better? Is Assad going to come down? Is that going to help or hurt?
I don't have a clue. I don't see how, in theory, if the idea was to get rid of Assad and now to get rid of ISIS, even if we can...
Are they mutually exclusive?
They seem to be mutually exclusive. Yeah. Assad has the backing of Iran and Russia. ISIS, who knows? They seem to be able to squirm around. Even if we can get our Iraqi friends to do that. Right now they're involved in a major battle in Fallujah. Even if they can do it, what happens the next week when the new group shows up? I mean, we had Al-Qaeda, now we have ISIS. What if it's, I don't know, the Smith organization? Who knows what they're going to call themselves? It's not the point. The point is if we really want to be involved in military action, I believe we need to go all out. And now, don't get me wrong, I don't think we are willing to. I am not willing to at this point in time. But it really bothers me that those people who are the most vociferous and the loudest about we need to take on ISIS, fine. Put troops into it and do it, and prove me wrong. And that would be fine. I want to be wrong, but thus far, hasn't happened.
So, what can be done that hasn't already been done, in your opinion, that should be done?
No, well, should be done is a different story. What could be done is a lot more troops on the ground to do the work, build up the true coalition, and send in the American military.
Is Saudi Arabia not involved in a way?
They're involved, but they haven't got the capacity to do it. I mean, there's no one in the region who has the capacity to do it except us. And don't get me wrong, I don't think we should. I actually think it's, hey, this is a regional issue that unless the region is willing to do this, what are we doing their dirty work for? I don't get it.
Yeah, you've emphasized Syria as a civil war issue, at least in the past.
It's a major civil war. And Assad's a bad guy.
Yeah.
But let's not forget that when Assad first had his first problems, many people here said, well, we should be helping all the rebels. Well, that's a nice, easy statement. If you think of it in terms of the American Civil War, where there was two sides, the blue and the gray, which side do you want? That's not the case here. There's 15 different sides, of which one of them, which was against Assad, was ISIS. So if we had done it right away, what we would have been doing initially is helping the very people we are now trying to claim to try to destroy. I just think that our policy and our approach has been wrong on this issue from day one, and I don't see it getting much better in the near future.
And then let's talk about refugees and humanitarian aid and all that. So there was this World Humanitarian Aid Summit in Istanbul a few days ago, and I don't think anyone from the U.S., certainly no one high-ranking went. So why was that? Was it a mistake? Do you think we should have had someone there?
I don't know. I mean, we do more than our fair share when it comes to world humanitarian aid. Not too long ago, we came back from South Sudan. The U.S. is doing more than our fair share around the world. Syria is an issue that's not going to go away. There are going to be refugees. I don't blame anybody for running away from that war, especially with women and children. Yeah. If I had my family there, I'd probably be doing the same thing. I'd probably be in a boat trying to get to Greece just like everybody else.
It's just so scary, the crossings and the danger and the overcrowding.
Just over the weekend, we had, I don't know how many...
3 incidents or something?
Several of them coming out of not just we're not even talking about Libya.
Yeah.
I mean, and you can throw a stone from Libya to Sicily, pretty much, a little overstatement, obviously. And, people are still doing that. And we're not even making the news on that one for the most part. Yeah. And Italy's being overrun itself with refugees that they can't handle.
So now we've discussed this before, but I want to see if your view has changed. So the U.S. at one point last year said it would take up to 10,000 refugees from Syria and similar countries. And so far we've taken, depending who you ask, between 12 and 2,200. Mm-hmm. So should it be more? Is U.S. involvement? I know we do a lot.
We have always taken refugees from around the world. I don't have any problem taking them, but as we said then, it would take time because we have always vetted refugees.
Right.
And the people who are opposed to taking any, like Donald Trump, said, oh my God, they're all terrorists, this is terrible. Well, that's just not the case. 99, are there terrorists involved? Of course there probably are. You get 1 million refugees, there's going to be some bad people amongst those people. But that doesn't mean that everybody should be then treated the same because there's a handful of bad people there. It means we need to do our job and try to make sure that the people who do get here are not those bad people. And I think they're doing a reasonably good job. That means it takes time
Yeah.
to vet them. So will we get to 10,000? I think we will. I hope we will.
How long will that take?
I don't have a clue. It'll take what it takes to make sure that America is safe.
Alrighty, so now invoking Mr. Trump again, he's had this idea of constructing a wall to limit immigration.
Well, it wasn't his idea, but
from Mexico. Whose idea was it originally?
I have no idea whose it was, but it's been around a lot longer than he's
But
been.
he's had some very specific, vociferous.
I don't think he had anything
explanations
specific.
of it?
He said vociferous ones, not specific.
Okay, so I don't quite understand this. So I tried to go. I went to his website and I tried to understand what it was that he was trying to do here. So he suggested that one way of getting it built, with Mexicans paying for it, is to promulgate a proposed rule that would redefine wire transfer accounts so that you couldn't transfer money out of the U.S. into Mexico. And then he said that would force the hand of Mexico, because $24.4 billion?
He's an idiot. I mean, it's a
Yes.
stupid proposal. I mean, these are people trying to send money back to their families.
Right.
And
Do you know how much an average
No, it's a lot.
Mexican national
I
sends
haven't
back?
got a clue.
It's a little under $2,000 a year per person.
That's fine. I mean, whatever I'm sure that they do whatever they can do. And they're not the only ones. Every single foreign national probably does something similar.
Of that sort.
Yeah, it sends money back home.
Yeah.
As did all of our ancestors at one point. All that being said, if it's made illegal to do it through wire transfers, they will find an illegal way to do it, just as happened in Iran for years, in Iraq, and Saudi Arabia. It has been illegal for years, and they have the halal system. The halal system is an illegal system. Like, gee, there are criminals in the world that find ways around American laws.
Do you see what that is?
Basically, it's a way you go to somebody who's not legally bound to do anything, and you give him $1,000, whatever the number is. He charges you a lot. And then the money doesn't move. He picks up his friend, he picks up the phone to his friend in whatever the country is that we're not supposed to be doing business with, and tells his friend over there, guess what? I just got $1,000 from Mike Capuano. Give
Are you
his
sure
mother,
you want to invoke yourself here?
whatever, whoever it's going to be,
Yeah.
give his mother-in-law or his mother, $500 or whatever the number is. They
Right.
take off, and that's a huge slice.
Yeah.
And what ends up happening is poor people stay poorer than they would otherwise be, and people are not allowed to help their families. And guess what? The transfer still happens illegally, and it's just it's a ridiculous statement to make. And all it's going to do
I don't
is hurt
see how it could-
hardworking people. I'm not saying that immigration shouldn't be dealt with. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have strong borders. I've always believed we should, but you have to do that in a sensible way. And that sounds good. It won't work.
All right, so now here we have Bob Goodlatte from Virginia, who has proposed.
Massachusetts, born and bred,
Is he really?
Springfield area. Yep.
Ah, I see. Virginia. And he is House Judiciary Chair, right?
Yes, that's
And he
correct.
has proposed some immigration reform measure that would allow governors to basically, I think it's fair to say, ignore federal policy regarding immigration and
I don't know what Bob has done.
that refugees that have been accepted into the country don't necessarily have to
won't
settle in a
happen.
locality.
It won't happen. They can't do it. Immigration policy belongs to the federal government.
Doesn't it
by the
have to be a
by the
federalized-
Constitution. It is a federal issue.
So
States
then how
do
can-
not do immigration.
how can he-
You can offer any law you want. I can offer a law that we should all speak Spanish. It doesn't mean we're going to do it tomorrow. You can offer any law you
But
want.
it's given attention, at least things
not
I've
by
read,
me.
as if it were a viable proposal. So,
I don't. That's up to the people who want to do that. I haven't done it.
okay. All right. Next. All right. So, oh, by the way, do you know what Obama got his Nobel Prize for, Peace Prize for?
Peace or something. I don't remember.
I don't know. It's just kind of ironic what we were talking about before. He got it, this is just so muddled. He got it for, quote, his extraordinary efforts to strengthen international diplomacy and cooperation between peoples. I mean, I could do that. I could say that, right? I talked to my Israeli relatives.
Look, I love the
I
president.
talked to other
I thought it was
relatives,
silly for
my
him to
English
get the Nobel
relatives.
Prize when he got it. It was not based on any specific activity.
He
But
had
that's
it-
up to them to give it away. It's a private entity. They can give a prize whoever they
I
want.
think some people regret that they did it now. Okay.
Well, it's-
All right, so let's go to some domestic issues. The Green Line extension. All right, so on the 9th, is that right, of this month?
yeah, I don't
May
know the date.
9th, the state boards involved tentatively approved a revised plan for the 4.7 miles of extension of the Green Line at a cost of $2.3 billion. Okay, so now they changed all sorts of stuff, right? So have you any sort of general opinion on the changes?
I was surprised they did it that day. I thought they would wait and do it later.
Okay, so
I'm
that's
glad they
interesting.
did it that day, which is a step in the right direction.
Because it moves it along faster?
Yeah, there's no doubt in my mind that the Green Line's going to get built.
Well, I don't know if you've said that in the past,
I
quite
think
so
I have.
definitively. Well, it's easier to say that now. Why don't we say it that way? So
It would be ridiculous to walk away from $1 billion of
It
federal
would.
money. This is long overdue, and if they did it, and by the way, it is subject to a court case. This is being built because the state screwed up in the past. This is being built as a result of a
yeah,
court
I
case.
don't.
brought
That's
for the
what I
big
don't
dig.
understand is but it's still so. They've revised the plan,
Yep.
and the new plan has simpler stations. It has no fare gates, no escalators, just a few elevators, fewer connections, bridges and walls between the track and things next to the track, and the community bike path, at least one segment of it, is now no longer next to the track line. It's along McGrath Highway. And I got to say, that makes no sense.
But that's the part so far, to me, of all of it, of all the issues, that's the most troubling part.
That's so scary. That intersection with Broadway and McGrath, that's like one of the highest
Well, let's be honest. I mean,
fatality
right now,
intersections
I drive
in the
McGrath
state.
Highway every day. The whole idea of why I want the community bike path is to get people off
walk.
of McGrath Highway.
Yes.
And it's dangerous for them. It's bad for traffic, and we need to do
scary.
what we can do to get bikers off of McGrath Highway. But until they have an option, they won't get off.
And I know how to ride a bicycle, but just barely. No one would want me on a bike on that path that close
I
to
will
a car.
guarantee you that every day there is at least one biker on McGrath Highway who's a worse biker than you are.
Oh, I don't know about that.
I saw at least 3 of them this morning.
Uh-huh.
Not the least of which is ignoring traffic lights and the like. So what? They're there. They're
Yeah.
going to be there. The only way that legitimately get them off is to give them viable alternatives. The best alternative, I think, is this community path going not just to Leechmere. I need it to go all the way to North Station, but one thing at a time.
So can they
it's the one issue that I'm going to work on as hard as I can to try to get
So
them
can
back.
can it be
I don't know.
still
We'll see.
jiggled with?
We'll
so
see.
the Friends of the Community Path have an alternative plan apparently that would reduce costs, but I think not have this segment that's by McGrath. And they're holding a presentation at the VNA on June 14th. I don't know if you knew about that one.
They're coming to see me soon.
Okay.
I'm open-minded.
So it makes no sense to me. And it's also so ironic because what is the ultimate way to decrease automotive pollution? Well, that's to propel yourself forward in something that doesn't burn any fuel whatsoever, right? So that would be a bike or your feet. So it just seems so ironic to me that this would be compromised.
Only 2% of the population of Greater Boston commutes by bike. And so therefore, it's not going to change.
That's interesting.
Yeah, but it's still the second highest in the country.
What's the highest?
Second or third. Portland and maybe San Francisco, second or third.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not nothing.
Right.
But it means 98% of people commute to work in another way.
Yes.
More often than not in an automobile. And so the idea here, to me, the pollution is not about, I mean, I'm trying to get the bikers off because I want to encourage biking, number one. Number two is that whether we encourage or not, there's going to be some people who do it. I think the more people do it, that's great. I think that's wonderful, but it's got to be safe for everybody. And it has to allow traffic to continue to flow. Traffic will flow worse with bikes on McGrath Highway than they would on bikes on the commuter path. Now, don't get me wrong, we can have the commuter path directly to somebody's work, and some people will still choose to go on McGrath Highway, but then it's easier to then ask our police officers to do their job to stop those individuals and say, excuse me, you now have a viable alternative, you're no longer allowed here. And not because it's a bad thing, it's a good thing to separate bikes from cars.
Yes.
I ride a bike quite a bit. I don't commute on a bike. And
Where do you ride your bike? On the community path going
sure,
out?
I've done everything. I do
Have
street
you gone
riding
all the
too.
way out to Bedford?
Yes, I have. Not this year.
Good.
But yeah, I have. And you know, I like bikes. I like bike riders. I have no problem with them. But I think in order to make everybody truly happy and truly safe, you got to separate the two. And the best separation is when they are completely separated through a community path. And again, it's not happening at the moment. That's of all of the features that I know of the redesign. That's the one that I like the least.
All right, well, I think a lot of people would appreciate that you have that view.
Well, it's not doing it just for the cuteness of bikes.
Yes.
I'm doing it for safety.
Yes. All right, so now I want to talk, I know this is a state issue, but it's also a national issue. So in North Carolina, there was this public accommodation bill, HB 2, that prohibits localities from creating their own anti-discrimination rules for protections for LGBTQ people. So, and now there's a public accommodations bill, often known as the bathroom bill, in Massachusetts. The Senate has already approved it, I think, the state Senate. And the House, in one place I read they're supposed to vote on it tomorrow. Do you know?
I don't know.
Okay. So what is your opinion on transgender bathroom and other public accommodations?
I have not read the Massachusetts bill, so I can't speak to it specifically. But the whole concept to me is a ridiculous debate. I don't care about this issue in the sense that in women's rooms, there are individual stalls.
Yes.
You won't know who's next to you.
Right.
In a men's room, there are stalls, there's also urinals, so I might, in theory, know who's next to me. But if somebody's standing in a urinal, it's a pretty good bet that's
It's
a
a
man.
yeah.
And if that man wants to wear a skirt, I really don't care.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the only thing that offends me is that some of these people are conflating this with child molestation, and they did this before when it came to gay rights, as if people who are transgender or cross-dressers or whatever, as if they're all child molesters. Now, I agree. If we could pass a law that said child molesters are not allowed into any other, they shouldn't be allowed in any bathroom, that's easy. It's illegal to be a child molester. Anybody who caught child molester, I would love to punch those crimes up. It's one of the few crimes in the world that really gets me worked up, is when you have abuse of children or seniors who are defenseless. That's such a small number of these people that we shouldn't be saying to everybody else who just has other issues, what's the big deal? Well, I really don't get the big deal about this whole thing. And it bothers me that people have been targeted.
Isn't it also sort of backward? Because if your gender identity is one way, then going in the bathroom that's your birth
If a woman
gender
comes into a man's room, she won't be standing at a urinal. And if she is, good luck. That's a very difficult thing to accomplish.
It is.
You know.
So do you think the state proposal should pass?
Again, I haven't seen the state bill. I have not read it from, the generic news reports. It sounds pretty simple and pretty straightforward. And if that's the case, then it should. If there's some technical details about it that I'm not aware of, that's a different issue.
Okay. All right. Now I'm going to ask you one other thing that's sort of irrelevant, but I'm curious what you think. So, state ballot question proposing legalization of marijuana for recreational use by adults. So, first of all, do you have a sense of how many people think that this is a good idea, support it? So there was a poll in April said 57% supported it. So what's your position?
I've always been supportive of it, not new. But I will be honest, I think that what we need to do is we need to push hard to get a standard and a measurement stick of people operating under the influence. If you want to sit home and get high, fine. It's like smoking cigarettes. You already know what it does and what it doesn't do. What I don't want you doing is at some level driving a vehicle or operating heavy machinery or whatever it might be.
So like alcohol?
Like alcohol. The difference, as I understand it, and I'm not the scientist on this, is that with alcohol, there's a very easy way to determine whether you're drunk. You can put that on your iPhone right now. Anybody can do it. I don't know that there's an easy way to determine whether you're, I'm not even sure there's a legal standard yet as to what would be impaired. I think that has to come in conjunction with it. You can't just have people driving up down the street.
So as this ballot question is stated now, I don't know that it has that. I
haven't read the ballot question yet.
So if it didn't, so would you support this if it didn't have that?
I would support it with the caveat. If I have to vote on it that doesn't have it, then I would trust the legislature to actually take action.
You would trust legislatures?
Sure, the legislature
You're part of the legislature.
I don't think legislative bodies are always that irresponsible.
Okay.
And I worked for the legislature when 2.5 passed, when Proposition 2.5 passed. We changed that thing dramatically from the issue that was passed to what was, because what was passed couldn't work.
Yeah.
What we ended up with worked. It did what the drafters wanted to do. We worked with Barbara Anderson and her friends. It's the same thing here. I haven't read the bill. If the bill is incomplete, which I would say it is incomplete unless it creates a standard, and a standard that can be clearly measured by police officers or by the legal system, then it puts the public in danger. I am all for you being able to, have a joint in your house if that's what you want to do.
All right, well, on that thought, we have to end. This has been Congressional Update with Michael Capuano. Have a great day.